Global Airlines is the new kid on the block, looking to challenge British Airways and Virgin Atlantic in the highly competitive transatlantic business class market. Their first flight from Glasgow to New York was met with pretty poor reviews. Has the airline learned anything from that flight? Join me as I go on board the second outing of their Airbus A380 flying from Manchester to New York JFK. Is this going to be a revolution in transatlantic travel? Welcome to the channel. I arrived at Manchester Airport by train. Terminal 1 was a short stroll across an enclosed walkway. Global Airlines had a set of check-in desks, including some dedicated to first and business class passengers. However, there were no queues at all, and I walked straight up to an agent. The baggage allowance was the standard business class one of 2 checked bags weighing up to 32 kilograms or 70 pounds each, plus 1 carry-on bag weighing up to 16 kilograms or 35 pounds, so not as generous as BA or Virgin with the carry-on. Beside the check-in desk was a selfie backdrop so you could take a commemorative photo celebrating the flight. Global branded cupcakes were also being handed out. From check-in, it was a very short walk to security, where there was a dedicated fast-track lane. From security, you walk through endless duty-free shops to get to the departure lounge and stairs up to the business lounges. Global business class passengers had access to the Aspire lounge, although there's nothing aspirational about queuing for 10 minutes to get into a lounge. Inside wasn't any more inspirational. I don't think even the BA Galleries lounge has much to worry about. Let's look at costs. I bought an economy fare and was lucky enough to be upgraded to business class. A business class return fare costs £3,470 if booked the day before the flight. That compares to £4,184 with Virgin Atlantic flights on the same dates. Although that's not really a fair comparison, as the global flight was a one-off non-scheduled service. From the lounge, it was a short walk to the gate. Firstly, passing the line to get into the lounge, which had grown even longer. The flight was departing from gate 20, which turned out to be the bus gates. Despite this being a Global Airlines flight, it was operated by Hi-Fly. Even the boarding passes weren't Global branded, but from Swissport.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first Global Airlines flight from Manchester to New York JFK. Flight number HFM 382, operated by Hi-Fly. We would like to commence boarding by inviting any guests seated in our first and business class cabin to please come forward to boarding.
We boarded a bus which soon headed across the airfield to the aircraft. The flight was on Global Airlines' sole aircraft, an Airbus A380-800. Registration 9 Hotel Golf Lima Oscar Bravo Lima. It was 12 years old and had previously been owned by China Southern Airlines. Normally, a remote stand would be a bit annoying, but today it provided everyone with lots of opportunities to take photos and selfies in front of the aircraft. We boarded the aircraft up steps to the lower deck. We then walked through the first class cabin to use the internal staircase to reach the upper deck where the Sky Pub was waiting. Business class took up the front 2 cabins of the upper deck with 70 seats in a staggered 1-2-1 configuration. I was seated in the front cabin at window seat 15 kilo. The front cabin was full almost exclusively of social media influencers. The seat configuration hadn't changed since the aircraft was owned by China Southern, although it had been reupholstered. Beside the seat was a fixed counter. On the seat was a duvet and pillow. I couldn't find any details of the seat online, so I resorted to a tape measure. The seat had a width of 18 inches. The width between the tops of the armrests was 23 inches. In front of the seat was an entertainment monitor which had a 15-inch diameter. Below this was a controller, beside which was a USB-A port. At floor level was a footstool, on which were Global branded pyjamas and slippers. Overhead were individual reading lights, but no individual air vents. On every other row, the seat was to the aisle. These seats were a lot more exposed. In the middle of the plane, every other row had pairs of seats directly next to one another. Overhead there was plenty of storage for bags, with additional lockers below the windows. Soon after I boarded, I was offered a choice of water, juice or champagne. The champagne was Laurent Perrier. A certificate commemorating the inaugural flight was on the counter, alongside a bookmark. A Bricks branded amenity kit was provided. It was a good quality case with extensive contents. There was a lip balm and body lotion from Murdoch, a dental kit and Global branded pen, a wooden comb and hand mirror, earplugs and a shoehorn. A Global branded eye mask and standard airplane socks were also provided. As business class amenity kits go, it wasn't as luxurious as the likes of Emirates, but was certainly more impressive than either BA or Virgin's current offer. Beside the headrest was an additional reading light. The sides of the headrest were adjustable. At the back of the counter was a power socket. There was also a touch-operated lamp. A bottle of water was also provided. Below the counter were controls for the seat. A manual safety briefing was delivered by the high-fly cabin crew. We pushed back from the stand 18 minutes behind the scheduled departure time. We taxied across runway 23 right, taking about 20 minutes to arrive at runway 23 left for our takeoff. If you're enjoying the review, please do give it a thumbs up. The flight time from Manchester to New York was scheduled to be 7 hours, but today we could expect a faster journey of 6 hours and 20 minutes. In general, the cabin was well maintained, although there was the odd bit of damage where old stickers had been removed. The table pulled out from below the counter and then flipped open. The entertainment screens were not in use on this flight. However, there was a QR code to connect your own device to the entertainment system. It had a limited range of movies, TV shows and audio content. There were 56 movies, including Conclave, Skyfall and 4 Weddings and a Funeral, together with 3 episodes each of 4 TV dramas, 12 documentaries and 4 cartoons. There was also a basic in-flight map, although this didn't give any timing information. As entertainment systems go, it was not that extensive. Although entertainment was available over local streaming, there was no Wi-Fi. A neatly printed menu was provided. The lunch comprised 3 courses. There was a choice of 4 starters, including caviar, 3 main courses and 3 desserts. Orders for the meal were taken as drinks were served. This was about 30 minutes after takeoff. I opted for a second glass of LP and was also given a packet of crisps. The champagne was excellent. I'd be grateful if you subscribe to my channel to come along for future journeys with me. Shortly after the drinks, a hot towel was offered. This was a good quality towel compared to other airlines. Top-ups of the champagne were offered about 10 minutes later. The meal service started about 1 hour after takeoff, which was an improvement on the first flight from Glasgow, where there were complaints of a 3-hour wait for lunch. A crew member laid a tablecloth before the starter was served on a tray. A napkin holding cutlery was then added, before a choice of warm bread rolls were offered. I opted for the caviar service as my starter. It was served with blinis, creme fraiche, chopped chive, grated egg and chopped capers. Alongside the starter, more champagne was served. I was also offered a glass of red wine. Both glasses were handed to me rather than being set down on the table. The empty crisp packet wasn't cleared away. The napkin was of a decent quality linen with the Global logo embroidered on it. A selection of metal cutlery was also provided. The bone china salt and pepper pots were also Global branded. The caviar came in a 30-gram pot, which retails at just over £60. It was great to see caviar on the menu, not something that you see on other transatlantic airlines. I think I've only ever been served caviar in business class on Qatar Airways. The starter was cleared away, leaving the empty tray and condiments. These had stickers over the holes, which would have made it very easy to pinch as a souvenir. A further glass of wine was offered between courses. The onboard wines included Laurent Perrier and Laurent Perrier Rosé champagnes, 2 reds, 2 whites and 2 rosés. The bottles cost £22.16 on average, or just £12.55 if you excluded the fizz. By comparison, this was over £4 per bottle less than the wines on Virgin Atlantic. Although the average rating on the Vivino website was 3.9 out of 5, the same as Virgin's wines. For main course, I opted for the grilled fillet of beef. This was well presented and tasted just as good. The meat was pink in the centre and not overcooked, as is often the case on airlines. I mentioned earlier that orders for the meal were taken with the drinks order. I ordered the cheesecake for dessert, and at that point the crew checked that there would still be sufficient portions. However, when the desserts were served, I was told only citrus tart was left. It was good. However, it was rather annoying to hear the crew speaking to the passenger behind me. He'd also ordered the cheesecake. He was offered both alternate desserts before a cheesecake was then produced for him. Despite the poor dessert service, overall the meal was good. The food was excellent, even the citrus tart. The service was just a little rough around the edges, but this was only the 3rd flight for a new airline. At the very front of the upper deck was a business class washroom. It was fairly spacious. Margaret Dabb's toiletries were provided. There were also some flowers. At the rear of the 2nd business class cabin, there were a further 3 washrooms. These were smaller than the one at the front, but had the same toiletries and flowers. One of the 3 had a baby changing table. The business class cabin was less than half full, with only 86 passengers on the entire flight. The aircraft had a capacity of 506 passengers, so it had a load factor of just 17%. Also at the front of the upper deck was the Sky Pub, open to first and business class passengers. It was basically just a counter with drinks set out and a space to stand around. A barman was on hand to serve drinks and take photos for the passengers. To one side, a 2nd counter had a selection of snacks. I headed back to my seat with a gin and tonic and a snack. I checked out the onboard entertainment streaming. The movies played without any buffering or stalling. A 2nd hot towel was offered. I tried to recline the seat into a bed, only to discover the controls didn't work. This wouldn't have been a problem, as there were plenty of other empty seats to swap to. A good quality duvet was provided, but there was a rather flimsy pillow in a cheap pillowcase. I changed into the pyjamas. The top was comfortable, although only a small/medium size was available. About 90 minutes prior to landing, the a la carte afternoon tea service was offered. There was a choice of classic, smoked salmon or vegetarian afternoon tea. Again, a linen tablecloth was placed on the table. I opted for the smoked salmon afternoon tea. and was offered a small warm scone to accompany it. The meal consisted of smoked salmon with some cream cheese and sliced cucumber. Some blinis in a plastic bag accompanied the dish. There was also a plate of Sussex cheese with some grapes and the small scone. There was some honey to accompany the cheese, but nothing for the scone. More drinks were offered. I opted for an orange juice. Again, the food was very good, although small touches like some jam for the scone were missing. The map on the entertainment system told me we were approaching New York. However, it didn't provide useful data like how much longer the flight would take. Soon the seatbelt signs came on. We came into land at JFK on runway 04 right and then taxied to a remote stand near Terminal 4. So what were my overall thoughts of the flight? Does it give BA or Virgin a run for their money? In the short term, the answer is no, it doesn't. This is an airline with one aircraft, which it can't fly itself, with an entertainment system that doesn't work and no onboard Wi-Fi. It doesn't offer a loyalty scheme, which is critical to the success of other airlines, and more importantly, it doesn't have any scheduled flights. However, as a concept, this was a good flight. Accepting that this was an inaugural service and there were some teething problems, overall the service held up. It appears to have been a vast improvement on the very first flight from Glasgow. Similarly, the food was very good. In particular, the fillet of beef was one of the best steaks I've had in the air. And although the average price of a bottle of wine was lower than competitors, the wines I tasted were of a good quality. The amenity kit, pyjamas, slippers and duvet were impressive. It's just a shame there weren't larger sizes of the PJs or a better quality, larger pillow. What we don't know is if the service I saw on this flight is what the service would be when the airline finally comes to launch a scheduled service. And that is the crux. Until there's a scheduled service, it's really hard to tell how worried, if at all, the existing carriers should be, or whether indeed this is a revolution in transatlantic travel. What do you think of the concept of Global Airlines and the service on their inaugural flight from Manchester? Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed the review, please give it a thumbs up so the algorithm knows it's good. And I'd be delighted if you'd subscribe to Doors to Automatic and join me for future flight reviews.